Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cross Commission Podcast. My name is Saif Kadri. On the other line with me is Jake Nazar. Jake, everything, everywhere, all at once. As I did a lot of research this week, finally figured out that title.
This should be a new bit of yours, Saif. You just go back and find Oscar movies from the past you haven't seen and just make it a podcast gag. This week, The English Patient.
Ralph Fiennes' second best movie. You know, number one is Quiz Show. You know that for sure. I will die on that hill. But of course, with Bracketology season, full effect, we are very glad to have our good friend and just excellent poster, Mark Hart. Mark, welcome back to the pod. Almost game time for Selection Sunday, so really looking forward to this episode.
Yep, we have 10 days left. I know that's hard to believe, but we are down to double, about to be single digits, and we have 70 games to play in 10 days to decide this thing.
That's an average of from now until there was a game today. Holy Cross beat UMBC 15-7. It's a little surprising.
So that's 69 games left because I was counting that one.
Yeah, so upset there. Tomorrow
there's 10 tomorrow.
Yeah, 10 tomorrow. St. Joe's and Richmond might be the game of the weekend. Gets you started at 4 p.m. Army Loyola is at 4:30 on CBS Sports Network, and it continues through Georgetown Loyola, top 20, or not Loyola, pardon me, Georgetown Villanova. That's for number one seed in the Big East. That's at 7. So 2 top 20 games tomorrow. In addition, the Patriot League finishes their entire slate tomorrow. There are 22 games on Saturday.
I think there's 26 because it's not counting the 4 conference tournament games.
All right, I was just looking at the IL calendar, so
yeah, I don't think they put the Big Ten and MAC games on there, but either way, it's a lot.
They have the Big Ten, and I think they have the
Michigan and Hopkins.
Yeah, they got the Big Ten ones there. 3 national TV games: Notre Dame and Penn. Didn't exactly age well as the one Ivy League game of the year.
They should flex that.
Yeah, they should. Princeton and Yale's at 12 on ESPN. Pardon me. So 4. There we go. Princeton Yale, which also didn't quite age as well, but you know what? I'm not going to blame him for that one. Yale was in the top 10 preseason. Princeton Yale's at 12 on ESPNU. Notre Dame Penn is at 2 on ESPNU. And then ACC Network has a doubleheader at 3 and 5. Virginia Duke and Syracuse North Carolina. There are 2 games Sunday. Canisius Quinnipiac and Marist Manhattan. And then there's going to be games. I don't think there are any games Monday.
There's 2 on Tuesday, and then Thursday through Sunday is full throttle.
Yeah. So we have, with the exception of Monday and Wednesday, there are games every day for the games 8 out of the next 10 days, because there are games on Selection Sunday as well, obviously. Mm-hmm. So a lot of lacrosse.
Very busy time.
We love lacrosse.
Well, I would say I love lacrosse maybe aside from the last 4 days of the season because it gets a little busy, but
yeah, bracketology season, right? How about it, fellas?
Jake, I think you've got 3 different brackets for us to look at.
I do. Let's dive right into it. We'll have 45 minutes on the clock tonight, so when we go an hour and 20, you can laugh at us.
We did our best.
Yeah, we're going to do our best. We're going to try and hold it. There doesn't appear to be as much to discuss. There's always things to discuss you could find. And of course, there was a selection committee top 10 for whatever that's worth and whatever people care about it. But we will run through all of it. I'll hit 45 minutes. And I will run through each of the 3 brackets. We'll go through Mark's first. We'll go through Patrick Stevens at USA Lacrosse Magazine. And we will finish with Terry Foy's at Inside Lacrosse, which he dropped. So Terry's dropped yesterday. Patrick's dropped Monday, I want to say? Tuesday. And Mark, you dropped yours Monday morning. So nothing substantially, I think, has changed in the last
Yes. So it's on that, just quickly, Stevens and I are pretty much consistent that I'm Monday, he's Tuesday, and then IL is who knows. They don't have a pattern.
All right, let's get after it. So let me share my screen, and I will. Let me see. Can I get it up here? Not that one. That's not the one I want. Apologies for the terrible radio here, folks. Let me find the right one that I want. No, is that not it? So there we go. Share this tab instead. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Away we go. All right. This marks update as of April 21st. So after the games of this weekend, he has Maryland back at the number 1 seed, correct, Mark? They were 2 last week.
They were 2 last week.
Yeah, so Maryland back number 1 seed against the play-in game, which currently projected as Sacred Heart and UMBC.
Actually, quick correction. It was 2 weeks ago that Maryland was 2. They were number 1 last week as well. I just checked.
Okay. All right, sounds good. And Mark, this, if we should probably go through this, how do you determine we might have talked about this in the last show, but how do you determine the AQs?
So right now it's who's leading the conference in each, like in the conference standings, because right now there's a clear leader in every conference. There's no ties to be broken that are like both teams are 4-0 or anything like that.
Indeed, that's sometimes a difference between.
It is, but I think they were all pretty aligned right now on AQs though.
Yeah. So Maryland because Maryland is getting an at-large as the 1 seed.
Correct. Ohio State would be the AQ
against Sacred Heart out of the MAC and UMBC out of the America East. Cornell is up to the 2 seed. Pretty sure that's their highest mark of or projection of the season to this point, facing ASUN, Utah, or NEC Robert Morris. I'll just go across. So in the 8th spot, Duke up to currently projected to get a home game. Significant jump for Duke after their win over Syracuse against Army, who is currently projected Patriot League AQ, Duke being 8 against Army. 7th seed projection is North Carolina facing Richmond, who is the projected A10 AQ. This has been a pretty common matchup to this point. North Carolina took a pretty sizable loss, I think 12-6 to Notre Dame this past weekend. That's kind of lowered their stock a bit, as we'll look at. 4 seed Ohio State, who, as just mentioned, is getting the Big Ten AQ. Ohio State with a big comeback against Michigan on Saturday, won the Big Ten regular season title. So they have a bye week this week, along with Maryland in the Big Ten. They're projected to play CAA AQ Towson. Towson has clinched the CAA regular season and 1 seed, so that tournament will be at Towson next week. 3-seeded Princeton, getting an at-large. Cornell's the projected Ivy League AQ. Cornell will host the Ivy League. Will Cornell host? I believe. I think it's confirmed.
Confirmed.
Yeah, because they have the head-to-heads over Princeton. They have head of Yale, Princeton, Harvard. Villanova, as mentioned earlier, Villanova is currently first place in the Big East. They will play Georgetown tomorrow night. Whoever wins that game will be the 1 seed, but the host, Mark, if I'm correct, it's at Denver this year?
It is.
That's a home field advantage.
It probably will be the home field advantage for the 4 seed in the Big East 2 years in a row, because last year the tournament was at Villanova.
Indeed. And that helped Villanova a lot last year. They played Georgetown really close in the final game. They upset Denver. 5th seeded Penn State projected to go against Syracuse. It's been a topic of conversation this week on Twitter. Penn State playing ACC teams. Well, maybe it'll happen in round 1. Cuse is a team, of course, after Cuse has lost 2 in a row after Ryan's Liberation Day against Notre Dame. And the Orange have a big game this week against North Carolina, which could decide which of those 2 teams gets a home game. And maybe, at the end of this, which of those teams might need to win their ACC tournament semifinal. And then 6th-seeded, the Fighting Irish are back. Maybe, we'll see. We've done this a couple times this year with the Notre Dame. But they're currently projected to get the 6th seed in Mark's bracket against the Harvard Crimson. That would be, obviously, former Notre Dame defensive coordinator Jerry Byrne taking his Crimson back to Arlada to face the Irish. Notre Dame assistant coach Chris Wojcik, formerly the head coach at Harvard. So a lot of familiarity there in that matchup if it comes to pass. Mark has the last two in as Harvard and Syracuse. And then there's, for the moment, I would say, we'll get into this, gap from the first two out to the first four out to Michigan. And then really, as you can tell, a pretty sizable gap here to the rest, BU, St. Joe's, and Fairfield.
It's really just a grab bag after Michigan. Like, I think that Stevens and I had the same basic groups of teams, but these teams are all AQ or bust after Michigan.
All right. So speaking of Patrick Stevens, we will share his projection now. He has Maryland as the 1 seed as well against Robert Morris or UMBC, both those AQs. He has the same 8 seed matchup, Duke hosting Army. He has Notre Dame as the 5 seed, so 1 spot up from Mark, playing Harvard though still. Penn State is his 4, playing CAA AQ Towson. Princeton 3 against Villanova, that is the same. Carolina versus Richmond is also the same, but he has just Carolina 1 spot up as the 6th. Ohio State is the 7 seed for him, Big Ten AQ, playing Syracuse. And then Cornell is the Ivy AQ, 2nd seed against Sacred Heart or Utah. The last 3 included for Stevens, Duke, Harvard, and Cuse. And the first 3 on the outside, Michigan, BU, and St. Joe's.
So quickly before we move on from this one, basically all the differences in this bracket for mine are being generated by Ohio State.
That will certainly be something to discuss. All right. Last one, Terry Foy's inside Lacrosse. He has Jacksonville as the, so this is a difference in projecting AQs. He has Jacksonville as the AQ against Sacred Heart. I think, is this due to, does Terry go by RPI?
He does.
There you go. So Jacksonville is currently 38th in RPI. Utah is 48th. He has Duke as the 8, but he has them playing Harvard in round 1. Penn State is the 4, facing CAA AQ Towson, which is similar to Stevens. He has Notre Dame as the 5 as well, facing Army, again, the Patriot League AQ. Boy, I tell you, that'd be a heck of a first-round matchup. He has Georgetown as the Big East AQ. Again, Georgetown is 24th in RPI right now. Villanova 31st. All the Big East teams are AQ or bust. Against 3-seeded Princeton. Richmond is the A-10 against 6-seeded North Carolina. Syracuse against 7-seed Ohio State. All those North Carolina, Richmond, Cuse, Ohio State, very similar to Stevens. And then UMBC is the America East AQ. Rob Morris, NEC AQ, facing Cornell, who is the 2 seed. And that is all of our current projections at this point in time. And with that, I will share Mark's data table right now. And then we can dive into it. So, yes, gentlemen, what would we consider the major topics of note with the bracket right now?
I don't know if this is a major topic of note, but it's something that I noticed that if you exclude Ohio State from the conversation, all 3 of us have the seeds in the same order, that it goes a very obvious order of Maryland, then Cornell, then Princeton, then Penn State, then Notre Dame, then North Carolina, then Duke. All the disagreement right now is about Ohio State.
Interesting. Oh, my bad. There we go. Trying to play around, see if I can increase the size on this. Have to keep up. All right. Yes. So I guess we'll start with Ohio State then. So Mark, you have Ohio State seeded 4th. Terry and Patrick have Ohio State seeded 7th. And this has been a pretty common theme with the Buckeyes since the projection started. I'll go back. Mark, this is on Mark's Twitter. He tweeted out to us yesterday, if you want to go find it. Ohio State on March 31st was projected by Terry Foy Inside Lacrosse as out. That was obviously got a lot of, remember that kind of dominated the discourse that week. Mark had them projected 4th. Patrick Stevens at that point was behind the paywall. After that, Ohio State beat Johns Hopkins. And April 7th, Terry did not do a bracket that week, but Mark had them seated 3rd. Patrick Stevens had them seated 7th. They lost to Maryland at home. Terry Foy and Lacrosse had them in the field, but 9th. So basically, they were playing in terms of his. If you go to the Inside Lacrosse page, they rank the at-large resumes. Mark had them 5th. Patrick Stevens had them 8th. And then after they beat Michigan, Terry has them up to 7th. Stevens also bumped them to 7th, but Mark has them 4th. So in Mark's projections, they've never dropped lower than 5th. For Terry Foy or Patrick Stevens, they have never climbed higher than 7th.
Jake, will you read the 3 of our projections chronologically, meaning like mine chronologically, then Stevens, then Foy?
Yeah, sure. So Terry had them out at one point to start. Then he didn't drop a projection April 7th. April 14th, they were 9th, and then they were 7th.
So that's a noticeable upward trend, I'd say.
Indeed. Mark had them 4th, then 3rd, then 5th, then 4th.
I would say that is no noticeable trend centered around 4th.
Indeed. And Patrick Stevens, don't know, there was paywall March 31st, but since USA Lacrosse Magazine lifted the paywall, 7th, 8th, and 7th.
And I would say that is no noticeable trend centered around 7th, 8th, somewhere in that range.
Indeed.
So my question is, what changed about Ohio State to cause the upward trend in IL's bracket? Because the notable results of Ohio State's season happened before we started doing brackets. That was the win at Penn State, the win at Notre Dame, and the loss to Utah. Those are the 3 defining results of their season.
Indeed, yeah. The Penn State Notre Dame wins are the Penn State win was March 31st. Correct? No, it was the first week of Big Ten play, so that would have been March 24th, somewhere in that range. Because they beat Penn State, then they beat Rutgers, then they beat Hopkins. The Notre Dame one obviously was second week of March, I want to say, because it was after the Maryland game, which was Notre Dame Maryland was March 1st. So Michigan is their 3rd best win. That was obviously this past weekend. Virginia was also early in the season. Might have been February. And then of course that bad loss to Utah, literally the first weekend.
And Notre Dame March 8th, Penn State March 23rd. Yeah, they did most of the heavy damage well before that first. I think that's why it was such a outcry when Terry put that first bracketology out, and don't exactly know what Stevens had him, but unless you overly weighted that Utah loss to as part of their justification, or at least Terry's or IL's justification to keep him out of that first bracketology. They haven't done so much since that to jump from out of conference to a 7. Mark's pretty been consistent throughout the last 2 months.
Even Stevens as well has been a little lower but consistent.
I'm perfectly satisfied with having them a consistent low seed, if that's the way you evaluate this profile. What I don't see is the upward trend. I don't see anything that has significantly changed over the last 3 weeks here.
Yeah, I don't either. The big thing with them over the past 3 weeks is really just their RPI climbing, where they were, I believe, it was 12th. I want to say when we started doing these, and now it's up to 8th
right now.
And I think that personally, this is just my opinion. I think them being 8th means that I would then, for me, if they're 8th, I look at them in comparison to Duke, and who's above them. Duke's 7th. As we see at Ohio State, 2 top 5 wins, Penn State, Notre Dame, 4 additional top 20 wins. So 2 top 5, 2 top 10, 6 top 20, and of course a bad loss. Duke, that's comfy, and indeed, they are ahead of Duke in every projection. They're said, but that's an easy call. Duke's got a bad loss as well. They have 2 fewer top 5 wins, 1 fewer top 10 win, and 1 less top 20 win. Pretty easy call there. Go ahead.
Not an official category, but I think this will kind of play into 2022 as well for the ACC. But the lack of out of conference big wins, Duke's best out of conference win is Richmond and Michigan. And not that Ohio State is littered like Maryland, with big out of conference, but they do have one, and it's a top 5 one, and one that happened to beat Duke as well. So it's just like, it seems like unless you really say like, that loss to Utah, gives them a really low seed. Like, yeah, like that's a resume of a top 5 team.
Yeah, because I'll go on. North Carolina is 6th in RPI. I'll go to North Carolina. That's kind of bare bones a little bit.
That's just Duke's, but they beat Duke.
Yeah,
we got Michigan, good out of conference win, and of course they beat Hopkins.
And they beat Virginia and Hopkins is.
But yeah, we did. My theme of like out of conference, like nobody in the ACC has a big out of conference win, even a top 6 out of conference win, or definitely top 5. But like, I don't see, and I don't know, like that. Again, that's not an official criteria, but like, I think that's one way the committee is going to like differentiate these. Well, like, how do they do against each other, or like, how did one team do against the like? I think that's going to help Ohio State like a good amount.
I think.
And then if you go up one more, you're comparing them to Notre Dame, who they beat.
Yes, Notre Dame does have 2 top 10 wins, but not 2 top 5, and then 4 top 20. That seems pretty clear to me.
And then the one we actually spent a lot of time talking about, the one with Penn State.
Yes, that to me is more of the conversation, because this is certainly getting consternation from Buckeye fans.
Jake, you might can get both of them on screen at once, actually, if you scroll a little bit to the left.
I can at least get their wins.
Okay.
There we go.
So Ohio State has better wins, period. The metrics aren't as good, though.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, it's tricky. You've got better wins for Ohio State. Head-to-head feels like the most, I think, the real kicker, because they have an extra top 5 win, but other than that, they're pretty like they each have 4 top 20 wins. Overall, it's 6-5 in just overall top wins 1 through 20. Ohio State does have that additional victory, top 5 victory. The counterpoint could be Ohio State has that bad loss to Utah. And then the metrics, as Mark mentioned, Ohio State's 8th in RPI now and still 18th in strength of schedule. Penn State is 4th in RPI, and their strength of schedule has jumped up 1 spot to 7th. I think it is. I'm fine with Ohio State behind Penn State, because then you get into the conversation of, all right, well, should Penn State be seated ahead of Cornell if you go by head-to-head? And as we just looked at, Penn State has a top 5 win and then 4 other top 20 wins. Cornell has, granted, there is a bit more distinguishing here, a top 5 win, 3 top 10 wins to 1, and then 5, but 1 less top 21. But head-to-head, you can argue head-to-head in play there, if you would like. Penn State beating Cornell, and Penn State beat Cornell on the road too. And we can talk all we want about, well, if you play a safe, I mentioned a couple times, if you played that game 100 times, Cornell probably wins it 99 out of 100. Doesn't matter. There's no margin of victory included in the selection committee process. There's no, well, I watched the game and for 59 minutes, or 58 minutes, I thought Cornell was the better team. Penn State would counter back, well, we beat you on the road without our entire starting attack. How much you could really glean from that game at all at this point of the season is, who knows? But all that matters is that Penn State won for the purposes of this.
I think the complicating point of this comparison is Princeton.
Yeah.
That if you start talking Penn State and Cornell, Princeton gets wrapped into the conversation.
Indeed. And Princeton.
And then suddenly you have a trio that all beat each other, which is basically the conversation we had when we were putting this bracket together.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say for Princeton, I don't want to figure out how to phrase this. Princeton doesn't have any must wins at this point because they're going to make the NCAA tournament. But their resume has not insignificantly diminished a little bit in these past couple of weeks.
I wouldn't say it's diminished. I'd say it's softened. I think
that's a good word. That's better. Yeah, that's better. It's the wins. They've beaten the same teams, but Carolina at one point was top 5 in RPI. Dartmouth was in there at one point, I believe, in the top 20. I think they had at one point, definitely 2, maybe even more top 5 RPI wins at one point in time. This is still excellent.
So Harvard, they were flirting with 6 and 5 for a bit.
Yeah, so this is still, and right now Harvard's flirting with the top 10. This is still an excellent resume. Again, if you are an at-large team and you can be considered a lock on April 24th, you have an excellent resume. But it has, as Mark said, softened to a degree that if Princeton were to take a loss to Yale this weekend, while it wouldn't be a bad loss, Yale's 19th, and if Yale beats Princeton, that will do some good things for the Eli's metrics. I think, and we've seen this trend, this is the first time Princeton has been lower than first or second in any of these metrics. They're a third. I could see with a loss for them, I don't think they'll take 2 losses in a row. They only have 2 losses all season. But with a loss here in the next week, I could see them maybe dropping more to that 4, 5. Probably 5 is their floor.
And I think when we did this 2 weeks ago, that was what we threw out as their floor. Like if everything went wrong, was somewhere in that range.
Yeah. And look, the flip side is it's a possibility that every game they play the rest of the way is a top 20 opportunity.
I wouldn't say it's a possibility. I'd say it's a darn near certainty.
Yeah. So
because Yale most likely has Princeton and Cornell left, which is going to do great things for their metrics, even if they lose.
Yeah, I mean, Yale lost to Albany last week and still remained in the top 20. So Princeton could pick up 3 more top 20, and then Harvard maybe a top 10 win, and Cornell would be a top 5 win, almost surely more likely than not. And Princeton could still there's still certainly a world where Princeton gets the number 1 seed. So I would say that was a point that, kind of, they look more similar to Ohio State right now than they did, I would say, a couple weeks ago, aside from the bad loss, which is obviously what's keeping Ohio State a little lower.
Before we wrap up this, I guess, point of disagreement about Ohio State, Jake, who has the best wins right now?
Maryland.
Who has the second best wins? I think this is the discussion.
Yeah, Maryland's beaten 1, 4, 5, 8, 9, which is a pretty ludicrous, which is kind of the point I was making on Saturday, I think, with Ryan. Man, Maryland's got a pretty ludicrous set of wins. So
the way we're supposed to think about this, Maryland is currently 3-5-8 in terms of win brackets.
That's a lot, man. 8 out of 10 is so the 2 non are Delaware and Loyola. That the only ones they have that haven't picked up the win. So Maryland certainly. After that, I would say wins. All right. Ohio State's got 2 top 5, 2 top 10, 6 top 20. Cornell has 1 top 5, 3 top 10, 5 top 20.
I think that's Ohio State in that case.
Princeton
has 1 top 5, 4 top 10, and 5 top 20.
I think that's the discussion, though, is 2-2-6 versus 1-4-5, because those are built in very different ways. But Ohio State's really top heavy.
Yeah, I would say I would probably lean Princeton.
I would probably also lean Princeton, but I think that is a discussion: is does Ohio State have the second best wins, and if they don't, they have the third best wins.
Yeah, because I think 2 top 5 is the one. Cornell's got 3 top 10 to 2, and then it's Ohio State's got those 4 top 20 wins down there as well. And every opportunity they'll have in the Big Ten tournament, they'll have potentially 2 cracks at it if they win their semifinal. Will be additional opportunities for that. So, yeah, I think Ohio State is. It'll be interesting to see how the committee treats them, because I don't think there's been a team like them in the field in terms of their metrics and their wins in a while. That the last couple of years there's been the team's metrics and their wins and their ranking and all that sort of stuff has kind of been very closely tied together over the last couple. I don't think you've had a team where there's a real split. And look, now and we talked about this 2 weeks ago, that split has lessened, or that gap has lessened. Before it was, well, they could have the 3rd best wins, but they're 12th in RPI. Well, now they're 8th.
And the thing was, from my perspective, we knew it was going to lessen. That if you did the simulations, it was apparent that it was going to lessen as they move through Big Ten play.
Yeah, so I will be intrigued to see how the committee treats them, because Mark, you have this graphic, this table you've tweeted out before. What's the largest gap between a team's seed and their RPI in the past? I mean, goodness, I think you had it for since 2017.
I can hunt it down while we talk about something real quick. My gut feeling on this is that all of our calls in the end on Ohio State are going to basically converge. That if Ohio State loses their Big Ten semifinal, I expect that they'll probably be like a really low seed, like a 7 or an 8. If they make it to the Big Ten finals, I suspect that they'll probably end up like in the 4 or 5 range like they are now. And if they actually win the Big Ten, who knows? I mean,
yeah, for sure. I mean, you could argue that they have an outside shot at the number 1 seed. If they get the win back from Maryland, to split that 1-1, or even if Maryland loses the semifinal, and Ohio State runs through, picks up what it would be a top 20 win against Michigan or Rutgers, and then a top 5 win potentially against Penn State. Or what I will say is there's a universe where, and this shouldn't be discounted, there is a universe where they win the Big Ten and actually it maybe doesn't, because they could beat like Rutgers and Hopkins. I mean, that's not in that world, it's like you already beat those 2 teams. Their top 20 wins. Does that really change a lot for it? So
Ohio State likely needs a win against Maryland or Penn State in there to really make it happen.
Yeah, Maryland, I would say, really, because that just evens up that head-to-head and takes that kind of conversation off the board. But yeah, I think that for right now, I think them at 4 is the right.
I know this was kind of a wandering conversation about Ohio State, but I guess the point here is understanding how to think about how to put all this together. That when you look at the data, the obvious thing is Maryland's number 1. Like, no matter what the committee says about Cornell at number 1, Maryland's clearly number 1 right now. Then you end up in this situation where you have a trio of teams that all beat each other: Cornell, Princeton, and Penn State. So then the question is, do you think about them as a trio, or is Penn State sort of hanging off the back of that? And I came to the conclusion that Penn State's sort of not quite with the 2 Ivy League teams. Then the discussion becomes, is Ohio State in comparison with Penn State? And the answer is yes, they're pretty close. Ohio State won at Penn State. So there's 4 or 5, and then it all trickles from there with the ACC teams in a very logical order. And you see that in all 3 of our brackets, that we essentially have the same order aside from Ohio State. That Stevens and Foy were doing the comparisons between Ohio State and Duke that you did and decided that Ohio State was ahead, and then did the Ohio State-North Carolina comparisons and decided North Carolina was ahead. And that is where I fundamentally disagree.
I do too. I just don't think. I think there's 2 top 5 wins to 1, 2 top 10 wins. 2 top 5 wins to 0. 2 top 10 wins to 1, 6 top 20 wins to 4. The bad loss just doesn't. And look, I'm really just not a bad loss guy to begin with. I care more about who you beat.
I think as long as it's one, who cares? I mean, yeah, you're going to probably lose a spot or two in the seeding, but one bad loss it happens, you know?
Yeah, like who'd you beat? That's what's more important to me personally. All right, where we go next? I think the main point of intrigue at the moment is with this batch of ACC teams. And in particular, I would say Carolina, Duke, and Syracuse.
I think you can take Duke out of that. I think it's literally just Carolina and Syracuse.
Okay.
Well, asterisk if Duke beats Virginia.
That's why now listen, we've done, if you've listened to this podcast, you know we've done this.
How many hours have been spent on this topic?
I remember doing the preview for the 2019 Final Four with Ryan, and I remember looking at it, and I'm like, everything in my mind tells me that Virginia should win this game. I was like, Virginia's the better team. Virginia at that point had won what, like 12, 13, 14 games in a row that year, except for the game they played against Duke in the regular season. Virginia started 0-2, and they won like 10 in a row. They lost to Duke by 5 goals, I think, in Durham. Then they won the ACC tournament. They won their first round game. They played a game against Maryland in the quarterfinals. And so I was like, everything tells me that Virginia should win this game. I think Virginia's a better team. But at that point, Virginia hadn't beat Duke in, almost 10 years. Or, yeah, I think it was 2010, so like 9 years. Of course, Virginia did win that game.
And the year that they did win all their games, they didn't play Duke.
Yes, that was 2006. Yes. So Virginia's beaten Duke, because we know, 2 times in the last 20 years. It's insane. I
think before we really talk about these ACC teams, we need to zoom out and talk about the big picture real quick. There are currently 11 teams that clearly deserve to be in the field, and currently we have 11 spots for those teams. Everything's great. Everybody makes it that deserves to be in. What happens if one of those spots disappears?
Yeah. And I'll just go into this. This is the scenario that there's one scenario in particular that I think is not off the table. That is really caught my eye. And this was prompted by, I know Adam asked you this question, Mark, but we were looking at it in our group chat, kind of Army's paths to any potential at large. And at first glance, we were like, it looked kind of done. And then I'm like, well, hang on a minute. What if this happens? And the scenario that has caught my eye, which is why this Syracuse North Carolina game is, I think, hugely pivotal. I remember doing the thing. I thought Syracuse Duke was like the biggest game, kind of to determine how things would shake out, and it was hugely pivotal. It's gotten Duke from last team in to a seed. I think this Syracuse North Carolina game has arguably become the most pivotal game. All right, North Carolina plays Syracuse this weekend in the Dome. As we've talked about a lot, maybe a big difference in Syracuse's performance in the Dome vis-a-vis on the road. 5 o'clock ACC Network. Let's say North Carolina loses that game. North Carolina in the ACC tournament, if they lose to Syracuse, would play a rematch against Notre Dame, who we saw that game just a couple of days ago in Chapel Hill. Not to say there could not possibly be a change there. We've seen plenty of ACC games. There's a lot of volatility in these ACC games. It's not quite like the Big Ten, which, as you know, is usually very tightly packed together. The ACC games, you can see some real, they're in scores. So not to just need the chance that Carolina could lose and then beat Notre Dame. Could happen. But let's say Carolina loses to Cuse and then plays ACC semifinal against Notre Dame and loses. They would be 9-5, and their wins would be exactly this. And the Duke Duke could go to the top 5 potentially. It's a possibility. But Michigan, Virginia, Hopkins is probably staying there unless Michigan launches another Big Ten, run to win the Big Ten AQ. The most likely scenario is Carolina's wins do not really materially change where they're at. They stays a top 10 win against Duke. It stays 3 top 20 wins against Michigan, Virginia, and Hopkins, and they don't have anything kind of lingering in the top 20.
Their RPI in this scenario is 10th to 11th range.
Okay. So Carolina loses 2 in a row. Their RPI is 10th or 11th, maybe 9th, something like that. Army wins their next 2 games and then loses, perhaps to BU in the Patriot League championship. What is the argument for 9-5 North Carolina getting in over 13-2 Army, who has these wins and maybe one of these other 2 pop? Colgate, UMass, probably not. But the BU loss, which would not be a bad loss. It would. So they'd have no bad losses. They'd have beaten Carolina. They'd have the same number of top 10 wins. And they would have just one. Now, this could change. They got these on the cut line. What is the argument for 13-2, 9-5 Carolina over 13-2 Army, who Army beat head-to-head?
The argument is that the arbitrary number beside UNC's name is 1 or 2 spots higher, which is complete nonsense.
Yeah. And I'll go back to this is where we'll go back to 2022 because this is the last time we had kind of a call like this. Ohio State was 3 spots behind Notre Dame in RPI. Ohio State did not have a top 10 win that year. But Ohio State got in because they beat Notre Dame head-to-head, and they also beat Harvard head-to-head. That got the Buckeyes in the field. And the difference in RPI was about 3 spots. If Army is 12th in RPI and Carolina is 9th, or it's 10th versus 13th, I think that's within range to where I just, again, maybe all of Army's wins like fall off here and they wind up with just 1 top 20 win. That to me is more
I think Yale is a near certainty to count. I think Rutgers is the one to worry about.
So to me, that is, if Yale's probably going to count, we'll go with if somehow none of these, if just it was 1, that to me is the more argument for North Carolina, is if Army just has basically 1 win. I don't think even if it's head-to-head, I don't think a 1-win profile is worth NCAA tournament. But if it stays like this, I really don't see how.
So I spent a lot of time poking around this scenario earlier in the week with Zach of Lacrosse Reference. And that was how I had the RPI sims on this. North Carolina is going to finish either 10th or 11th if this happens. And the paradoxical thing about this is it probably would be better for North Carolina or better for Army if North Carolina finished 2 spots ahead of them in 10th. That way they still have a top 10 win over North Carolina.
I was going to say that be really important for them.
That it probably is a more favorable comparison for Army if they finish 2 spots behind than 1 spot behind, which what sense does that make? So let's talk about the positives for this 2 loss in a row North Carolina, because there are some. So their bad comparison, as you pointed out, Jake, is to Army. That is the comparison they don't want. The positives they have are the 2 teams who could come out of nowhere to challenge for an at-large are Michigan and Virginia, and they beat both of them.
I'm just trying to see. So you're saying if Virginia beats Duke, gets into the ACC tournament, that would obviously increase their profile.
If Virginia goes on and say a 2 or 3 run game winning streak to end the season and end up in a conversation for the last at large, it could be against North Carolina, and North Carolina has head to head.
Definitely.
And it's the same story with Michigan, that if they win 2 games in a row to force their way back into the at large conversation, a likely comparison would be with North Carolina for the last spot.
And probably they'll be flirting with like a top 10 RPI. Michigan and Virginia, if they were able to pull off 2 wins against top 10 RPI teams in the ACC and Big Ten.
So that's the deal kind of with North Carolina, is that while they don't like the comparison to Army because of the head-to-head, they do like if somehow Michigan and Virginia get on these huge runs to end the season, and that ends up being the comparison for the last spot, that's probably going UNC's way just because of head-to-head. And it's sort of the opposite discussion with Syracuse, that when we talk about what if Syracuse loses these last 2 games, the comparison that they really don't like is to Michigan.
Okay, so if Cuse loses, and I would argue for Cuse,
they kind of look like Army's record. If Cuse loses out, a top 5, top 6 win, and 2
it's identical. Top 5 win, 2 top 20, 1 spot difference. Top 5 to top 10.
The problem here is that Army doesn't have the head-to-head to likely flip it their way.
Yeah, I would say for Cuse though. And you never know with this. We saw in 2021, granted much, much different circumstances, Syracuse got in over Army, where Cuse was the last team in, despite the fact Army had beaten them in the Dome. And that was obviously very controversial. One thing I'd point out that year was Cuse had... I need to look this. What Cuse's more results were going into that.
What year, Jake?
2021.
Let's not talk about 2021. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Syracuse was like 7-5, I think.
They were, yes. Cuse have been alternating wins and losses. They beat Albany 13-8. They lost by 12 to North Carolina.
Lost to every good team by like double digits.
Yeah, but then they came back and beat Virginia on the road by 1 point in there late in the year.
What carried
them? Did the double up Virginia year?
Yes, they beat Virginia twice, which got them in the field.
That's what got them in, was the 2 wins over Virginia.
Yeah. But my point is, for Cuse, I think in some ways, and this is where I think the committee could we'll call it lean on the regional advisory committee. But in reality, I think it's just gut feel, eye test, whatever you want to call it. Cuse will have lost 4 games in a row if they lose the North Carolina game in their ACC tournament semifinal. Man, teams have backed into the tournament before, but losing 4 in a row is, and especially because if they lose 4 in a row, their comparison is almost certainly going to be against a team that is either was on some sort of winning streak prior to, like if it's against Michigan. Michigan will have won a Big Ten quarterfinal and a Big Ten semifinal and then lost to probably Penn State or Maryland in the Big Ten championship.
Let's talk about that hypothetical because I think it's interesting.
If it's Army, let's say, between Cuse and Army will have taken 2 losses all year to the same team, but they will have won, 6 or 7 in a row before losing in the Patriot League championship game.
The counter argument to that, though, is look at the competition.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fair. Certainly. The Michigan one, I think, would be a little different.
I think the Michigan one's like looking in a mirror because they're going to look basically identical.
So, yeah, Cuse right now, 1 top 5 win, 2 top 20 wins. They're 8th in RPI. Michigan is 1 top 5 win, 2 top 20 wins, 13th in RPI.
And Michigan would add another win against Rutgers and then a win against Ohio State.
What I will say is Rutgers, that's 45. I've run some of the simulations, and Now, I think they'll probably. I think Zach at Lacrosse Runs did his, and in most scenarios, Rutgers finishes 20th. So Rutgers could be a little, they're flirting a little bit there.
So I will say the thing about that makes me uneasy is those simulations that Zach posted are an average. They're not taking into account that someone ultimately has to win these conference tournaments, like in the Big East and in the CAA.
Mm-hmm.
That a team like Towson or Georgetown or Villanova could easily bump them off because someone's got to win those games.
Yeah. So Rutgers is a little, but they would probably beat. Michigan would play Ohio State in their semifinal, correct?
So yeah, let's say that they beat Rutgers and Ohio State, but just say worst case Rutgers falls to 21st and it doesn't count.
You still have probably a top 10 win against. Probably almost more likely not a top 10 win against Ohio State.
A top 5 win against Maryland.
And then if they lose and Cuse loses, you'd have worst case scenario for Michigan. You wind up with 3 top 20 wins, two of which are top 10, one of which is top 5. For Cuse,
say Notre Dame holds on. Give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay. Virginia and Hopkins probably are sitting here.
So
and
Michigan
they're hoping for Colgate and Towson to climb in there and give them a sort of, volume argument.
Like the worst case for Michigan is 1-2-3. The best case for Syracuse is 1-1-3. Michigan has better wins. Syracuse probably has better metrics. I think that's a very interesting call if we end up in the situation.
Go ahead, Mark.
That Syracuse finishes 9-6 and Michigan finishes 9-7. They look very, very similar.
I don't want to be Cuse having lost 4 in a row, or in North Carolina. I don't want to be having lost 3 or 4 in a row sitting on as the last team at the dance floor. But people start poking holes more when their most recent impression of you is losing games.
But the thing is somebody's got to do something to change this because right now there's no argument.
Yeah, no, it has to. But I don't know. In 2 years ago, I feel like when we did this, we were like, man, nothing ever happens this last weekend. And then the last 2 years, a lot has happened this last weekend with Michigan and Princeton. And
I feel like the last time we did this, we were begging Duke to do something, and Duke did something.
Yes.
So yeah, we're begging like 7 teams to do something.
23, 24, yeah.
Act on the world.
I know we're already over time, and like there's a lot less variability in scenarios, but let's talk about a few key teams before we get out of here.
All right.
Let's talk about Harvard.
Yeah, that was another one. Yeah, we need to talk about them. Harvard, it's for a lot of when we talk about the importance of those non-conference games at the beginning of the year, it's I don't think any more apparent than this season. Harvard has beaten Syracuse, which is keeping them ahead of Cuse right now in the at-large pool. They also beat Michigan. Duke, before the Cuse win, Duke beat Richmond and Michigan in overtime. You flip those 2 results, Duke wasn't – honestly, even if you still flip those 2 results, Duke might not be in. But they won those 2 games. For Michigan is the biggest example. For Michigan, hey, all 6 of your losses are to top 10 teams. Great.
Safe, tell me about those 6 losses. What kind of losses are they?
All Big Ten ACC losses.
I believe the word used last time was hard. Those are 6 hard losses.
Those are tough. This is Barry Bonds. Yeah, it's a hard 6.
Yes, and so it's a hard 6. Unfortunately, to connect the baseball reference, they basically were all with runners in scoring position and 2 outs. Like, listen, man, you really would have rather beat Harvard. You really, really would have rather beat Duke.
Like their problem is all the teams that they're likely to be compared to on the bubble, except for Syracuse, they lost to.
Exactly. Which that's part of the thing with all our losses are to top 10 teams. Well, yeah, but when you're on the bubble, losing to top 10 teams might not be great.
That's your competition. Yeah.
That's your competition. Like, even still though, if you just flip, I mean, gosh, you can go through all these games except for Notre Dame and Harvard. Even Harvard, that game, they were in that game in the fourth quarter. But Penn State had a lead in the fourth quarter, lose by 2 or 3. Notre Dame, forget about it, they got blown out. Carolina, got blown out. But Duke, I mean, just
real time, we're like, they're going to rue the day. When that was ahead.
I mean, they had a 2-goal lead. They had held Duke to 1 goal to like the last 30 minutes. And they give it up with 3 goals towards the end. Ohio State, I mean, my gosh. Ohio State had 5 goals with 5 minutes left and then scored 5 goals.
If you flip one, we're having a different discussion about Michigan. Like right now, the discussion about Michigan is, wow, they've got a lot to do.
Yeah, it's
so.
I mean, so yeah, my point of the head-to-head being so pivotal, or these non-conference head-to-heads, I should say.
If Harvard doesn't win their Ivy League semifinal, though, how at risk are they? Because I don't think it's coming from Michigan, which is I think the point we were making there.
Yeah, I mean who they play this weekend? Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that doesn't do anything.
Just give them that win.
Okay. Well, let's say it does do something. It prevents you from being in a lot of trouble. Because all of a sudden, if they lose to Brown,
I believe the slogan in this situation of this show is "Don't do anything stupid."
Yes, that would qualify. Losing to Brown. If they don't win their Ivy League semifinal,
you're 10-4, no top 5 wins, probably a top 10 win against Syracuse, and then a collection of 11 through 20 wins.
Man, I think it kind of depends on what Syracuse does, because in a world where Syracuse and Harvard remain pretty tied together, that's great for Harvard. They won. They beat them in the Dome. In a world where Syracuse, let's say, beats North Carolina and beats Duke or Virginia in the ACC semifinal, at that point, Syracuse and Harvard are not tied together anymore.
Yeah.
Syracuse is in a different they're in a different section of the plane.
That's kind of the problem.
That gives Harvard a top 5 win, maybe potentially, and
could
drag them over whoever, probably North Carolina then, because that means North Carolina lost this scenario.
But then Harvard has a bad loss, which Carolina does not. And Harvard metrically is probably not going to finish where Carolina would. I don't think a top 5 win for...
Wait, Harvard's playing Brown?
Yeah.
That's not going to be positive.
So we're saying
if they
Harvard,
win that, then it's a guaranteed game against a...
Yes, we're saying if they lose.
Oh, lose. Forgive me. I thought you said
If they beat presumably Princeton, I mean they're in the tournament. I think that would give them, because they finish in the top 10 RPI and they'd have a Princeton win to go with that. They're in. But yeah, I think that
if Houston, Michigan finished strong, because that numbers could potentially make Michigan a top 10 and Syracuse a top 5. And there's no out-of-conference wins. I think they're going to.
How strong are we talking Michigan finishing? Because if Michigan wins the AQ, then all of a sudden, as we talked about, there's one less spot to go around. Michigan, if Michigan finishes 2-1, I'm not certain they get in the top 10. They could, but it's not a guarantee.
I think that's to Harvard's benefit and to an ACC team's detriment.
I think it depends on which ACC team they're being compared to.
Yeah, I don't.
That one, like I said, if Syracuse is on the rise, that means North Carolina gets an L. Who knows? Where exactly? At least this week, we're in this scenario. At least North Carolina has a loss.
So let's say that. Go ahead.
What if these ACC teams all split against each other though?
Exactly. Let's say Syracuse loses to UNC, but then UNC beats Notre Dame.
I don't know if Harvard can clear that.
That becomes more.
And Syracuse wins against North Carolina again in the championship, ACC championship.
Yeah, so then Cuse would clearly be clear of Harvard. Let's say
That means Harvard beat a team who already beat Notre Dame, in Cuse, and then they doubled up, and then.
Yeah, but I mean, let's say that it's Carolina. Let's say Carolina gets a top 5 win against Notre Dame, and then both teams have a top 5 win. Both teams probably have 4. Carolina would have 5 top 20 wins, and Harvard has a bad loss. Are you taking Harvard? Or are you taking Carolina?
And all the ACC teams are going to have Harvard covered on metrics.
I'm
taking
common
Carolina.
opponents. They got the Michigan win. That is literally all the ACC's best wins, Michigan, except for Duke's over.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if it's out of conference. If North Carolina beats Notre Dame, if North Carolina beats Notre Dame and has a top 5 win, and North Carolina has beaten Duke and has a top 10 win, and North Carolina
then you just beat your conference mates. You know what I mean? It's like somebody's got to I think they haven't differentiated themselves out of conference. So that's why ACC was so strong.
Are you taking Harvard with?
In your situation, if Cuse wins the ACC tournament, wins this weekend and wins the ACC tournament, that means that's maybe a top 4 RPI win.
Sure, but I'm saying in the scenario where Carolina beats Notre Dame and Notre Dame is also a top 5 win, then what's the differentiator between Harvard and Carolina?
I think they would flip. If North Carolina beats Notre Dame, and maybe Notre Dame outside of the top 5, bring North Carolina in the top 5. But
same thing. They would have the same resume, and Notre Dame would have a top 5 win over Carolina, a top 10 win over Duke. These two, and Notre Dame would not have a bad loss, and they'd be top 10 in RPI.
Jake, will you pull up the
main? Then is that maybe pushing Duke down? Maybe is Duke the one player that we're not paying attention to? That maybe not, because in this scenario, these other two teams run the ACC. That means Duke's best next win is Virginia. That means that they would have a top 5-ish win with Cuse if Cuse makes that rise.
If Duke loses to Virginia, then yes, Duke is in.
All of these discussions that Duke is safe are centered around that they beat Virginia. But if in this scenario where all they get is Virginia, they basically look like Harvard except better. Harvard can't clear that unless they win the Ivy League semifinal. Duke has better metrics and more wins. I mean, what's Harvard's argument? Jake, will you pull up the main sheet of my bracket real quick? The one that shows locks and stuff.
Yeah, hang on, let me find it.
I wanted to make a quick point about that before I get out of here. So I think we're basically heading toward a situation, if things sort of go to plan this weekend, where we have 3 potential candidates to get squeezed out of the field if there's a bid steal, and that's what I want to highlight. We can sit here and craft unlikely scenarios all day that Virginia is going to finish 9-7 and make it as the last team in, but it's probably 1 in a million.
That'd be Lars's best coaching job. That's it.
Can you zoom in on that, or is it not going to let you?
I think you
can. Yeah.
All right. So the safe category is what we're really focusing on here. I would say that Notre Dame is probably going to beat Penn, which effectively locks them into the field. I would say Duke is favored against Virginia, and if they win that, that's probably essentially going to lock them into the field. Someone has to win the North Carolina-Syracuse game, and that's probably basically going to lock them into the field. I think that leaves 3 candidates at risk going into conference championship weekend. The loser of the North Carolina-Syracuse game, Harvard, and Army. Those are our options to most likely get squeezed out of the field if there's a bid steal. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, I agree.
All right, so I'm about to hop out of here. I hope that we've kind of illustrated why we think things are the way they are currently. I know there's a lot of disagreement about Ohio State, and I think all of us certainly understand having Ohio State as like the 7th seed, but I think there's a general disagreement on this show with that evaluation. my parting thought would be that this currently seems pretty set in stone in terms of like there's 11 teams that have elevated, but obviously this all can change. There's a bunch of games over the next 10 days, as we pointed out. I'll have a full bracket again on Monday morning, and then I'll switch to my daily quote cheat sheet updates that are kind of like just quick snapshots where we are each day of the conference tournament weekend. So keep an eye on my Twitter feed at FieldyStick, and I'll keep you posted on where I think we are in terms of who's in, who's out, who's got to win, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mark, thanks so much, man. I mean, that's really
great
having you on.
Thanks again for having me on, guys. I'm gonna stick around and listen to the rest of the show. Listen to you guys preview some games.
Appreciate it.
That's good.
Take care, man.
All right. Safe. It's got that done in an hour, 5 minutes.
That's nice. Tight out. Right?
Look at that.
Like a baker's dozen. That's our hour. Just
All right. Safe, where do you want to go this week? What game's catching your eye?
Let's talk about the little Penn State thing. Penn State Penn State ducking ACC, which seems like I was kind of framed for a little bit. I was like, wait a second.
I don't think it was framed as Penn State ducking the ACC.
It was like, why doesn't Penn State have an ACC? I was like, well, the ACC probably doesn't want to schedule Penn State.
I mean, yeah, no, I don't think it's. I think it's it's a question we've talked about on here before too. It's when you look at the way their schedule is, constructed, and I do think that it. I mean, it's an obvious. Rutgers and Penn State are the only two Big Ten teams who don't play ACC opponents, and Rutgers at least did play Syracuse, for a couple of years. So, but otherwise, Ohio State plays Notre Dame, and they played Virginia. They've also played Carolina in the past. Hopkins plays, obviously, Syracuse, Virginia, and North Carolina, historical rivals. Michigan they played Virginia last year, and Notre Dame. They've swapped out, and Duke as well. They've added Duke in there too. North Carolina, this year they play 3. So they've certainly, before Michigan didn't have them on there, but now they've added, 3. Maryland plays 3. Virginia back on the schedule. Syracuse, they've added, and they have always played Notre Dame. They also used to play North Carolina as well. So that's at least the way I took it as being framed. Is like, I think someone probably just looked at the schedule and was like, hey, why don't they have, in comparison to the other Big Ten opponents who do. And because there's so many Big Ten ACC games that take place throughout the year. I do believe that now Tams was asked about it, and look, shout out to who was it? Hayden Lewis at 15 Hayden Lewis on Twitter. Shout out to
that's real reporting.
Yeah, like take it right to the source. Like, just. I mean, that's
got a question for you, Coach.
Because I'll be honest, it's not often that we actually hear much from these coaches like midweek availabilities.
Oh, Tams had time for that. It was like, we're coming to the office, son.
Yeah, he gave a great question, and Tams gave a great answer. I'll read out.
Please read it.
So Tam says, part of it is we try to build a non-conference schedule to prepare us for Big Ten. And you can find this at Hayden Lewis, at 15 Hayden Lewis. He posted the transcript of Tam's response. So part of it is we try to build a non-conference schedule to prepare us for Big Ten play. So part of it is we try to get the best opponents we can. I mean, if you look at our strength of schedule, it's a top 5 strength of schedule. Fact check, pretty close. I think it's 7th right now. I know there is certainly discussion about the ACC, but if you look at our schedule, it is a competitive schedule and it prepares us for the league that we play. That's number 1. So we try to do the best job we can of getting the most competitive schedule we can. Moving into our conference is not as easy as people may think. True. This is 100% part of the case. I do believe that Penn State and multiple other Big Ten teams have tried to schedule Cuse in the past couple of years. I know Michigan scrimmage Cuse. Rutgers obviously used to play Cuse. So, I mean, I remember a couple years ago we did a column like non-conference matchups we want to see, and Penn State Cuse was at like the top of that list. Get back to that in a moment. Two schools, northeast, kind of. I don't know if Penn State kind of qualifies as northeast necessarily, but sort of. And football backgrounds. I think they play each other in football a bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where there used to be the big independent football programs, Penn State.
Yeah. Look, big states, state kind of schools for New York and Pennsylvania. So, anyhow, I'm sure it's definitely not been. And shout out Grant Ament, who tweeted out in response to, I think it was James Hogan at Twitter who had to ask the question, and Grant responded like, "Look, it ain't been for a lack of trying."
That's my attackman.
Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod, definitely.
So and then Tams goes on. We have reached out to ACC teams. For some of them, it doesn't make sense for them to travel to State College, Pennsylvania, when the airport doesn't work out for them or the distance and location don't. This does feel like a bit of a.
He says his own plane. Come on.
So I mean, I'll grant it that for the Southern ACC schools, but Notre Dame, and Syracuse, I don't know. That might feel like a bit of a. Just maybe a subtle dig, a little bit, like, oh well, the plane or the travel doesn't work out. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, Notre Dame goes to Ohio State. Granted, I mean, Ohio State, Penn State's a bit of a. They go to Michigan, so, And again, I'm not saying Notre Dame. I don't know if Notre Dame and Penn State have tried to see each other. I mean, but Cuse goes to Maryland, so like, I don't know. It might be subtle there. Anyhow, it's not something that we haven't explored. Next year, we will have one. So Penn State will have an ACC team on the schedule next year. We'll just continue on. He thinks it helps some of the best lacrosse teams in the country, not for lack of trying. Sometimes it hasn't worked out. This is true. And Tams makes a good point here. And I think we talked about this on the pod. I feel we talked about it multiple times in the last couple of weeks. The way the Big Ten aligns their schedule with you play all your non-con games and you play all your conference games. How does it prepare these teams? Is it for the best advantages of these teams? Because really, again, we've mentioned so many times, the Big Ten it's a totally different season. You see this in the way these teams play. These games are rock fights. And I think it'll be interesting to see this year in the tournament. How do these Big Ten teams play when they get out of Big Ten play? When they face, it's not two defensive-minded teams. They're going to hit hard and things. Look, there is some evidence to suggest it might be a good thing. Maryland last year is a good example. An offense that was struggling, having to go through a slog of Big Ten games against Ohio State, Penn State, and Hopkins, which were top 5 in adjusted defensive efficiency. That's not going to help your offense much. They got out of it. They played Princeton. All of a sudden, their offense looks a lot better. On the flip side, who knows? Maybe it wears these teams out. It's a grind of a season. Penn State, good example last year. Kind of looked like they just didn't have much juice in that game against Georgetown. So interesting to see. But definitely, and Tams brings this up, the ACC teams do have openings. There's always like one ACC team who isn't playing a conference game. Notre Dame this week is off. They're playing Penn. Virginia last week was off. They played Lafayette, and that's kind of Virginia does schedule more theirs towards the front end. And you have who else? I feel like there's other teams that kind of have openings. Usually they don't play a super tough game in there because listen, you're in conference play. You don't want to. But Syracuse played Cornell. So there you go. This year, UNC played Army. Duke played BU. Mark sent this to me in the chat. So there's always there are openings for ACC teams. A Big Ten team cannot play unless they played midweek. And listen, I think there should be more midweek games. I completely understand not playing a midweek game in the middle of Big Ten play. Tam said it's not unwillingness to play them. Like I said, next year we'll have one of the ACC teams on our schedule, and I hope to continue to get more. But at the same time, I think our schedule does, without any AC teams on it this year, exactly what we need to build a strong strength of schedule and prepare us for a Big Ten conference and beyond. I would not disagree with that assertion. I would say that I think in general for ACC and Big Ten teams, it's just it behooves them to play one another, as we've seen. And it doesn't necessarily help everyone else with how these teams, how it does for these teams' metrics. But I think that I do think it helps. Penn State hasn't been, the last couple years at least, they haven't been hurt by their schedule. But, I mean, in a way, I would say maybe they were a little bit last year. Think of the way that, because they played so many of the Ivy League teams, and think of how the Ivy League, that was Penn State's non-conference schedule is the Ivy League. They're an unofficial Ivy League member in non-conference. Well, last year, the Ivy League only got one team in the tournament. And so their non-conference was they beat Cornell, but Cornell wound up being, I think, 11-20 when they fell off. They beat Princeton, who won the Ivy League AQ, but I don't think was the top 10 win last year. And then they beat Yale, who also missed. So having all your eggs in one basket in terms of a non-conference is, I think, it makes it hard. Penn State's non-conference the way it is now, and I'm not blaming this on Penn State. I'm just, because Sam's laid out the reason. I'm just saying the way that it's shaken out, it kind of they index on the Ivy League heavily. When the Ivy League's really good, that's great. 2023, the Ivy League got 2 teams in the NCAA tournament. Penn State 2023, they got 3 teams in. They got Yale, Princeton, and Cornell. They got 3 teams in. Penn State beat all of them. Penn was the last team out. They beat them. Fantastic for Penn State. 2024, I think it hurt them a little bit more. This year, it's gone okay. I think that adding an ACC team just gives them another opportunity. So, hey, if we beat this team, we're not necessarily totally relying on just how the Ivy League does. I mean, you see, Hopkins has all those ACC teams, which almost every year work out great. But last year they've had Georgetown and Denver. Last year, Georgetown and Denver were, Hopkins lost to Denver, but they beat Georgetown. So they have those 2 ACCs. In past years, Loyola's done really well. Maryland has Ivy League and Princeton. They play the ACC teams. So Ohio State has some ACC teams in there. So I think that I don't think that Penn State's got, right now they are 7th in strength of schedule. That's really solid. But I do think it definitely will help them to add an ACC team. I wonder who it is.
Yeah, I see the Cuse or Virginia, just for proximity's sake. And
I think
that connection.
I have a feeling it's Cuse.
But
that might just be me hoping, because I think Cuse and Penn State would be a great game. But my gut feeling is Cuse, just because Cuse has changed their schedule around quite a bit the last couple of years. I'm just going to be honest. I think Cuse could stand to improve their schedule. Cuse is 10th in strength of schedule right now. And when you consider the teams that Cuse plays, Notre Dame is, just look at it compared to the ACC teams. Duke is 8th in strength of schedule. Virginia is 6th. North Carolina is 11th, right behind them. And Notre Dame is 15th. Now, Notre Dame being 15th is basically just a function of Notre Dame plays Cleveland State and Marquette at the start of the year. And some of that, it's February in South Bend, Indiana. But Carolina and Cuse, I think Carolina's, we talked about Carolina's non-conference schedule a couple years ago, Mercer, trying to who else they had on there, a couple other, some teams were hurt. Syracuse right now has played 4 teams this year that were not in the top 30 in RPI in the non-conference. They played Vermont, they played Jacksonville, they played Utah, and they played Manhattan. When you consider the teams Syracuse does play, Syracuse played Michigan. They played Johns Hopkins, who was 4. They played Virginia, who's 6th in RPI. Or no, I'm sorry, let me look at RPI. Syracuse played Maryland, who's 2. They played Cornell, who's 3. They played Notre Dame, who's 5. They played Carolina, who's 6. They played Duke, who's 7th. They played Harvard, who's 10th. Syracuse has games against like 6 of 9 possible teams in the top 10. With those teams you play, I think your strength of schedule should be a little better, but it's some of these games are dragging them down. So I think that playing Penn State would certainly behoove Syracuse. I think for Notre Dame too, in some ways you could argue, Notre Dame lost that Denver game willingly, it seems. But now, where would they fit in Penn State on Notre Dame's schedule? I don't know, because Notre Dame replaced Denver with Georgetown. Yeah. Does Notre Dame maybe replace Georgetown with Penn State? Maybe. That could be something to. Or does Notre Dame maybe move that Penn game that's at the end of the year to something earlier, perhaps? But Notre Dame's schedule is always, just because they play 12 games, it's so, it's very difficult to kind of move things around.
Definitely. They got a nice little 2-week break there between Michigan and Duke this year. They probably could have played a game then. But March 15th to 29th, they had a off. You think definitely with a little bit more flexibility, as you know, they don't play the full allotment of games that they could possibly play. So I think unless Notre Dame has another 2022 season where they get kind of burned with unexpected losses and no way to kind of fight your own way to guarantee a spot, like they're probably going to stick with this formula because it kind of guarantees like at least a basement for your RPI to unless you have a totally abysmal season to like look at Virginia even with barely any wins this year, under 500, still within striking distance of a top 10 RPI. Kind of like a little bit of a racket. But yeah, shout out to James Hogan. Great, content. Got to get everybody in on it. Just retweeted Hayden's post. Definitely good to see some old school journalism there by Hayden Lewis. But yeah, moving our sites to this weekend. Jake, I think we'd right. We can kind of skip polls. We're like past poll season, kind of right into the final stretch of conference tournament time. But with the last remnants of the regular season. But in my heart, definitely got the Hopkins game thinking about a little bit. But I think it's not going to be one of our top 5 games for the weekend. But I mean, we kind of already touched on it during the last portion of our talk with Mark. North Carolina, Syracuse, probably most important game of this weekend. I don't know if you would go that far and say that, but for both, it's kind of seems like a crucial like pivot point for both of these teams in the season. Like win for either could help to solidify they're getting a pretty comfortable selection Sunday, and also just in terms of like ACC standings and going just before the ACC tournament next week. Being at home, Cuse, like kind of seeing that the Orange respond well to being in the dome. Gate kind of alluded to that. I watched him do a press interview. I think it was either driving to practice or driving back. It was doing a live hit. But yeah, he kind of said that the boys were looking forward to be back in the dome, back comfortable at home. It is kind of a rock show, especially when they get that offense start running. Head show return to Syracuse. Obviously played a role as a defensive coordinator. It's probably the biggest game of his, Carolina tenure. You can kind of say, obviously, Bush the head coach, but going back to the dome, if they could, put together a strong defensive effort and contain the Syracuse offense and steal a win on the road. I mean, I think we might see a even bigger reaction from Bresci than the one he had after beating Duke. And also Petro, equally happy. But yeah, and for me, like that's going to be the biggest game of the weekend. Duke Virginia just has this, just almost mythical quality to it. It's just like exactly Sisyphean, like a curse that like was like put upon the
Virginia.
Virginia.
You will win 6 national championships in like 20-something years, and every time you get to Memorial Day, you'll win the championship. But you'll never beat Duke. For the record, I think Virginia fans have happily taken that trade. It's like they don't have especially since they won the Final Four game in 2019. I think. So I think they like kind of happily take the trade.
Would you rather have 3 titles by Duke and this run on Virginia, or 6 titles and just never beating Duke?
Yeah, I think they take the
6. You take the rings, I think. Yeah,
exactly.
But it's definitely probably like gnaws at
I'm sure. It's just, again, we've talked about it so many times. It doesn't make sense. There's been great Duke teams and there's been not great Duke teams. We've seen tremendous Virginia teams that won championships, and we've seen not good Virginia teams, and it hasn't mattered. That's the thing is it didn't start with Virginia's like slide when they went those like couple years without winning ACC games. It started well before that. It started at like the peak of Virginia with Starsha in the late 2000s. It's something else. Carolina Cuse is, man, this is an interesting, again, we can talk all we want about, how the committee might look at a team on a losing streak. And we have seen, look, it's not, your results at the end of April are never necessarily completely predictive of your results in May. We have seen teams Maryland last year is a great example, looked dead and buried at the end of April, and people didn't want them in the tournament. And then they go on and make the championship game. There's Virginia, a couple of those runs with Lars, didn't feel like they were necessarily on a hot run, and then they stormed through the tournament. But obviously, certainly you'd rather be, I think it's a better way to say it is, even if the results don't necessarily line up for you, you want to be kind of building that foundation a little bit so that you're in good spot. And you want to kind of like a boxer, just like getting themselves into rhythm, and or like a pitcher warming up. I think that's where you want to be. And Carolina I don't think they're in that spot right now. And it's really going to be a fascinating question. Potentially to look back on we heard before the Duke game about Duffy and Petramala's injuries. And I remember saying like group chat, like they mentioned that they hardly practiced that week and they were kind of, game time decisions. And I said, well, that seems kind of auspicious, a little inauspicious. And, but then I was like, all right, well, they're playing and they didn't look hurt, particularly too hobbled. But Carolina's last 2 games, if you go by adjusted offensive efficiency, these are 2 of Carolina's 3 worst games of the season. Against Duke, even the win, and then against Notre Dame. And by Stony Brook was their early in the year was their worst. But that's February. It happens. By significant margins, these are their, worst games, or 2 of the 3 worst games in adjusted offensive efficiency. And, Duffy had, I think, 1 assist against Notre Dame, I want to say. Early on, he dodged. He was aggressive dodging early, and then after that, look, the thing with Duffy is, that guy's going to play hard all the time. He's fearless, and he's just going to go after whoever, you know, if it doesn't matter. Like, he'll go after Sean. Even if Sean Light stuck guy after, like, his mentality is to go at a matchup like that. Man, you look at his performances against Virginia 3-2, against Army 3-3, High Point 3 goals, Jacksonville 6-2, Hofstra 2-4, Princeton 3-2. 6 games in a 6-game stretch there after the Penn game, where he had 31 points in 6 games, and then a goal and an assist against Duke, and just an assist against Notre Dame. He's 1 for 12 shooting in the last 2 games, and 2 points. Significant drop-offs in his production for Petro. He been, kind of almost hot all season. The only one other game this year, even in that Stony Brook game where Carolina's offense struggled, he had 5 goals. You're just going by his goal totals this year: 4, 5, 6, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, and then 2 against Duke, 1 against Notre Dame. 3 goals in the last 2 games, 3 for 14 shooting. This, I think, is kind of right now it's the story for their season. Can these guys get back to full strength? And if they can't, does Carolina have the horses in the back to get through this run with these guys banged up? Because Carolina's attack has, if you look at Duffy, Petro, and James Madden, that's 79 goals for them. After that, you've got a combined, just doing some quick instant math here, 82 goals from the rest of the team. So 79 from the starting attack, 82 from the midfield. And look, Duffy and Petro are 67 goals right there. Ty English has 19 goals. So it goes Petro with 37, Duffy with 30, Ty English in the midfield with 19. Then you've got Matt at 12. But after other midfielders, Ryan Levy has 12 goals. Mason Suchek has kind of come on as a freshman. He's got 9. Dewey Egan with 7. Caden Harshbarger with 6. Spencer Wertheim with 5. Brevin Wilson. Like, they've had guys who are kind of maybe have stepped up a little bit, but yeah, I think you're a little. And you look at the points totals, 2 guys with the 50 and the 39, then 22, 22, 19, 16, 15. I don't know. I don't know if they have the horses to really make a run if those 2 guys are not firing. And it's one thing if they're at least kept quiet. They have if when they're healthy, they at least always have a gravity to them. An opponent is always going to want to slide to Duffy. They maybe slide, to Petro, and then maybe he can hit that. Like, there's a gravity to those players when they're healthy that will always open things up for everybody else. But if they're not healthy, teams are going to play them like that. Teams are going to be less hesitant to slide if they know Duffy's hurt. They're going to treat Petro with maybe a little less respect shooting. And he's always going to get a good amount of it just because, look, he's a shooter. You always got to respect the shooter. But yeah, the more you kind of go with injuries, the more teams are going to play you like that. Like we saw Hopkins with Melendez earlier, where they tried to basically keep him as a decoy. It's like it didn't really work. So it's hard to look past that as the real story here. Does Carolina have? Because when Duffy and Petro are going, you need just 1 or 2 other guys to chip in. And honestly, you might, if you really want to win a championship, you probably need 3 or 4 still. But if those 2 guys are banged up, you need like 3, 4, 5 guys to step in.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know if they have 3 or 4 or 5 guys.
Yeah, honestly, initially I gave it a little bit to Carolina just because I feel like they played pretty tough on the road. Like the Army game was a loss, but like the way they played in a hostile environment, I thought they played like really well actually. Yeah, even despite the Duke game is a low scoring game, but on the road at Durham, like to pull that out, the impressive. And they had Hopkins early on. When Melendez and the rest of the players that are injured, were capable, and Hopkins was like a top 10 team, and that was another big time win on the road. So a little bit felt like that, and just the way Cuse was playing. But it's Jake a little bit. I am concerned a little bit just about production value. I think just looking at young Petro's stats, and it just hasn't taken as many shots as he was earlier in the season. Like it seems to be connecting a little more. The Duke game, he only shot 6 times, but scored on 2 of them now. But I came a little bit concerned about Owen. Just he does seem to not be the same. That he said, like, it did look okay, at least like moving wise, and like nothing noticeable or any limp or significant reduction in speed. But it's just if you're just looking at just looking at their game by game stats, just kind of no total nosedive. I mean, for Dom was like 3 goals at Army. He has 10 shots, 4 goals against Virginia, 2 goals against Duke. But that was a quarter of the team's goals that they scored. The Notre Dame game was kind of noticeably quiet with 8 shots and only scoring 1. So I couldn't be able to.
Yeah, and I look at their.
I'm worried them getting down early. That's the big thing, because I could see like a quick spurt by Carolina, 3 or 4 goal lead, and then just the momentum and the energy from the crowd that kind of, and like being able a bounce back win after kind of 2 subpar performances.
And that defense, I think as well. Like they played, if you're just looking at their opponent, it's a very kind of inverse correlation between some teams. You look at their like performance defensively, and like I'll take Ohio State for instance. If you go by just raw offensive efficiency, or probably, let's go raw defensive efficiency rather. Like Ohio State's is usually you might expect, let's say, like an inverse, like, okay, like your raw, defensive efficiency will always be the worst. Like the highest marks will be against the best teams you played. And for Ohio State, it's not necessarily true like that. I'm just using them as an example. Like Ohio State's worst game of defensive efficiency is Utah. Their second worst is this is just raw, like, possessions of goals. Second worst is Air Force. But like Ohio State played essentially equally as good defense against Penn State as they did against Hopkins. And we've seen Hopkins like that to me, like that's a sign of a great defense. They played a Hopkins offense that's struggling. They held them in check. They took a Penn State offense that's been really hot, and they dragged them down to a, low scoring type game. If you look at Carolina, their best games defensive efficiency: High Point, Stony Brook, Michigan, Penn. The Duke game in there, that's the impressive one. It was winning that game on the road, like playing a defense game against Duke. But even still with Duke, we've seen them struggle at times offensively for significant stretches. Princeton game, Carolina, 45% defensive efficiency. Hopkins, 39%. Army, 37%. Notre Dame, 33%. I worry about Carolina's offense against a team like Cuse, or Carolina's defense, rather. Can they I think Carolina's defense can hold up for, as we saw, like a half. They played against Notre Dame. I think that with Petro, they're going to be really well prepared. Like the game plan they have is going to be good. But what happens when the other team's best players get rolling? What happens when you have to make, at a certain point, it's mid-game adjustments they just get harder and harder, and it depends a lot more on your talent. And I don't know about Carolina's talent. That Cuse, certainly you need with Cuse. I just want to see. I didn't feel a lot of life and energy from them in that Duke game. Just felt kind of drab a bit. So with Cuse, I want to see, do they have the juice? And that's where I feel like with Cuse, it's going to be the dome. They're already kind of hyping up. I saw, who was at the Syracuse SID, John Stark I believe, tweeted it out. Let me see what it was. Cuse is looking to go north of 50,000 in attendance for the first time since 2011. Put out a modest crowd of 7,500. Would bring the Orange average above 6,000 for the first time since 2011 and fifth time since 2000. They're already kind of laying the groundwork, feels like, for a big crowd. I don't know. I feel like the Orange the Orange faithful are going to show out. And it's kind of like we talked about in the Dome. It's a rock show. And I feel like you're going to get that vibe on Saturday. Late start too, 5 o'clock, some Saturday evening lacrosse. But you do need to see that with Cuse. Cuse, more than a lot of teams, I think, are a confidence team. When they're really confident and it's going right for them, they're rolling, like we saw in the Notre Dame game. When things get down and get tough, I do think that they have times struggled to work through that. So again, to the point of like you want to be playing your best lacrosse tournament. If you're Cuse, I at least think you want to feel like you're in a rhythm and you feel the team feels confident. I don't know how I feel about a Cuse team that's kind of in a rut going to the tournament. I don't know if they can work themselves out of that if they get there. I think they need to be in a good rhythm.
Pick 'em sheet.
All right, yeah, we got Richmond at St. Joe's, Villanova at Georgetown, Rutgers at Michigan, Duke at Virginia, and North Carolina at Syracuse. I'm intrigued by Richmond St. Joe's. How do we get? What are the? Because if Richmond either way is going to be the 1 seed, but if St. Joe's loses, then they are going to. If St. Joe's loses, they are the. Thanks, Mark. It's on the chat. Yes, St. Joe's is the 4 seed in the A10 tournament if they lose, and it would be hilarious. The first A10 semifinal is scheduled for 11 a.m. on Thursday.
Mm.
So if St. Joe's loses, they're going to play Richmond at 11 a.m. at St. Joe's.
Back to back.
On 11 a.m. on a Thursday.
I wonder if Richmond just stays in Philly for those 4 days.
Maybe, yeah, honestly. How much do we get in this game from either of these two teams? How much of their hand do they show? Most of the time with this, I'm like, listen, the lacrosse schedule is just too. It's not like football or even like basketball, where you play a bit long season, so maybe you don't like. The season's so short. I don't know how much of your hand you can really hide in some of these games. But last year, Richmond was coming in humming in A10 play. They beat St. Bonaventure by 11, Hobart by 13, High Point by 4, the UMass as well. And then they lost to St. Joe's at home. And 1-goal game. It was a great game. And then they played St. Joe's again in the championship, and St. Joe's took that one a little more handily. I'm intrigued to see how much will we get from this game. Richmond, man, they've just been rock solid all year long. They're 6th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 5th in adjusted defensive efficiency. Since their faceoffs at 48.7%, but since they got Jared Chenoy back, faceoff win percentage still has struggled in A10 play. Chenoy kind of had a nice run there for he won 74%. He won 65.5% against Duke. But last 5 games has been they peaked out at 46%. That's kind of the weakness. Goalie play is pretty solid. Thing is, St. Joe's, though, not a great face-off team themselves. So I don't know if that's an area they can really exploit. St. Joe's has leaned on their defense this year, and we talk about always giving credit to Ray for how he gets the most out of that team. They lost so much of that talent, the talent from that offense. I mean, 4, 5, 6 their top scorers. And now they've built around Levi Virch on the defensive end, and they have significantly improved in goal as well. St. Joe's last year was saved 48. St. Joe's last 2 years, 49% in save percentage and 45%, up to 55.6 this year in adjusted save percentage, a significant jump behind Tommy Gross, which has really helped them a lot. But I do wonder if you're starting to see the offense maybe go down a little bit. 9 goals against High Point, 10 goals against UMass. They don't really – the thing with that made them so deadly the last couple years, like if you look at 2024, they had – Levi Anderson was the main passer at 24 assists, but Matt Bomer also had 13. Jesse Jasons had 11, and then they had 5 guys with 20-plus goals. This year, 2025, Richie Laclandre's got 24 assists. Next is Griffin Mallory with 10. That's it. And they don't have as many flat-out hitters either. Ben Dutton, freshman, has 42 goals, so he's going to be the next star there. But 4 guys with 17-plus goals, and then that's kind of it. They don't have that's always their offense has always kind of been a lot of dodging. They always have a hell of a amount of dodgers, Canadian influence, guys who are really skilled. Haven't always been the biggest passing offense, and this year just doesn't feel like they have as many. Like they're 47th in assist percentage this year in the country. I don't know that they have as many dodgers in the past, so that feels more pronounced now. Their kind of lack of ball movement. So I think Richmond's ahead. I'm curious what Massey would have this at. My gut feels like Richmond is a couple goal favorite in this game. I think they're just a better. I think they're just kind of clearly better team this year. Massey has this at 11-10. So basically a coin flip at St. Joe's. Yeah, I don't know. My gut feels like Richmond's just kind of the better team, but
they're pounding. I mean, I'm just trying to do it back at the napkin goal differential this year. It feels like they're like plus 70, plus 80 in goal differential. Like aside from the the Duke and Cornell 1-goal losses, they just kind of trucked everybody. 9-8 win against Lehigh, but aside from that, I think the only other close win is the 3-goal win over Virginia. The last 5 games, I mean, Georgetown win is a close one. Sorry, I should have noted that.
This is just math I just did instantly, like right here. I could be wrong. I think they're plus 78.
Yeah, I was doing it. I was like, I didn't want to like, I was like, I felt like it was right there. I was like, they're just trucking everybody this year.
I mean, they've adjusted.
That's not like a thing you think of Richmond, a long history of like, just kind of do dominating wins, like good team, obviously, and stuff like that. But, it's always like all around good team. It just feels like really locked in defensively. Again,
oh my
God. Opponent is out of their control for most part. But like Hobart, St. Bonaventure, High Point, UMass, again, not like killer team. UMass, though, that was a top 20-ish team up to like a week and a half ago. And they've held all of them to 7 or fewer goals.
Only 2 teams have been above 30% against them in offensive efficiency, adjusted offensive efficiency. Only 2. It's Maryland and Duke. They held Cornell to 25%. I mean, that's the Cornell offense that we've raved about all season long, just so as being like Cornell's offense. Cornell has 9 games this year above 40% in adjusted offensive efficiency. I mean, it's nuts. I mean, if you go by raw offensive efficiency, Cornell's worst game is against Richmond by a 3% almost. I mean, like they are the other 2 games that are even kind of close are the Brown game, which is a couple weeks ago, and then the Lehigh game, which is Cornell Lehigh was what, like way back in the beginning of the year. Otherwise, that Richmond game sticks out as what Richmond was able to do to the Cornell defense. Yeah, I mean, they are humming. Yeah, I don't know. I feel if St. Joe's could pull this one off, it would be even more by significant margin, even more, because last year's team was. Last year those two teams were like neck and neck with each other, and then St. Joe's just played their best ball at the end, and Richmond didn't. I don't know. This year, Richmond feels it's not like St. Joe's in a good team. Like they're a pretty good squad, but Richmond feels Richmond's a top 10 team.
Well,
I don't like it. It's really been very
just the stats are phenomenal.
Yes,
we kind of always use like top 10 as a criteria of like a real Final Four like right team. If you have a top 10 adjusted offensive efficiency and a top 10 defense efficiency adjusted. Richmond is 6th in offense and 5th in defense, and they're the only one with even a top 10 aside from them is Cuse, and the differential, it's more Stark. Cuse is 4th in offense and 9th in defense. There's one differential for Richmond. The offense is 6th and the defense is 5th. Like that's
the thing is, it's been like this. 2022 2022 was the year where I like really that to me is the best Richmond team Chamati's had. The team that they should have beat Penn in the first round. That team was 9th in offense, 6th in defense, and also 6th in save percentage. 2023 they fell back. They were 25th, and by fell back 25th, 22nd, 37th in faceoff, 19th in save percentage. I still think they got the tournament that year. Last year they were 11th in offense and 2nd in defense. This year they're 6th in offense and 5th in defense. I mean, they're a top 10 team. Like they beat Georgetown. They beat Virginia. It feels like it's understated just because they lost the 3 games that were so crucial to their season. And I think we kind of lost sight of them a bit in A-10 play. But they lost to Maryland by 5. They lost to Duke and Cornell by 1. And then beating Virginia and Georgetown. That's the resume of a top 10. That's a top 10 team. I mean, and that's why I think as much as you do have to kind of question, can they put it over the finish line against these big teams? Look, if their first round matchup is against like North Carolina, that might be they might be the most favored like underdog team in the first round. I would absolutely see people. I think unless they get a really bad draw,
they're not gonna be scared of any ACC team.
But like this I'll say is the positive for them, because we've been mentioning this for a while. They for a couple years ago they kept being on that 2 line or that 3 line. They had to play like would you pick Richmond against Cornell? Now, granted, look, I mean, they did play. I mean, obviously a 1-goal game this year, but I feel like most people would pick Cornell. If they play Princeton, I think a lot of people would pick Princeton. After that, if they get like Ohio State. Or Penn State even. Like, I don't know, man. I think they're going to get a lot of, and especially if they get more towards whoever the 7 or 8 seed is, whether if they get Duke again or if they get UNC, something like that. Yeah, I think they're going to get a lot of buzz as a upset team. The weakness for them, just you're looking at it, is it's so hard to pull upsets when your face-off and goalie play is not elite. You have to really outplay your opponent. That I think is going to be the thing that is you got to really, really outplay your opponent if you don't have elite face-off and goalie play, because that's the path to the upset that makes it so much easier. You win 60% of the face-off, or your goalie can give you 15, 16, 17 saves. And their goalie play is not bad. I mean, their goalie play is solid, but it's not elite in the face-off play struggle. So we'll see. I'll take Richmond in this game.
Villanova Wildcats, Georgetown. Didn't talk too much about Big East in our bracketology just because of kind of a substandard season, the subpar season for the Big East this year. But Georgetown, kind of one of these odd teams. Tough, but numbers don't really got to support them. Outside of the top 25 RPI, Nova, kind of typical Nova season, up and down, maybe charging towards the end. It's kind of always feels like a replay of a previous Nova season.
Villanova is 59th in adjusted offensive efficiency, and they're first in the Big East. I mean, Villanova, how are they? This is insane. Like, I'm like, Villanova is 59th in offense, 33rd in defense, 14th in faceoff, and 60th in save percentage.
That's so scary, though.
I mean, how are they like last year? The offense has really struggled for the last couple of years, and they've just severe talent drain on offense. But last year they were still good defensively, and they were solid on faceoff, and they were decent in goal. I mean, I'm just, man, like they've won 1-goal game over Marquette, 3-goal win over St. John's where they scored 10 goals, 3-goal win over Providence, they scored 11, 1-goal win over Denver. Yeah, I just don't. I guess the thing what you say with their defense is it has been better in Big East play.
Two seasons starting out, 2-5, winning your last 5.
Man, that offense is. I don't know. I was kind of wondering, like Georgetown, because Georgetown's offense too. God, they scored 3 goals against Denver. That's just been a struggle all year long. But that was maybe Tim's big one though. I don't know. I can't go with a team with that level of offensive, those offensive stats against Kevin Warren defense. So I'll take the Hoyas.
Rutgers playing the first round of the Big Ten tournament, traveling over to Michigan to play the Wolverines. Yeah, Michigan again. Maybe not the end they were expecting. Definitely feels really tough if you're a Wolverines fan to be 3 goals up with 5 minutes and 30 seconds to play, winning your potentially the first Big Ten regular season, and then it all kind of goes to ash at the end with the big run by Ohio State. Rutgers, also because we were talking about the bracketology, up and down season, not really in the running for an at-large, but kind of frisky in terms of potentially making, a big run here. Just the fact that, kind of basing that off of, having beat Maryland, with the big win over Hopkins as well. Hopkins kind of a subpar season. I think Michigan should be able to take care of business here, but I don't know what after effects of just the entire drop off of having the 1 seed or in the in your hands with the game pretty much over, and then giving up 5 goals so that your arch rival celebrates on your field on the last game of their regular season. So but Connery's a solid coach, so I'm sure he'll get them over that loss. But I do wonder if there's a bit of a hangover, and as we noted before, Jake, getting of the first round bye hasn't been the greatest in the Big Ten tournament since they've expanded to 6 teams. But I think you're losing out on the regular season title and a week of rest. It's bitter pill to swallow, I'm sure, for Wolverines fans. Rutgers, kind of have nothing to lose. Didn't pull off the win against the Wolverines in the regular season, but have a chance to extend their season. I think they can kind of. I was going to say this is 2 teams that love having a rock fight. So just could imagine what the score is at the end of this one. But Rutgers may be able to keep it close. I wouldn't be surprised if they do pull an upset here. But I think everything in my heart's telling me Michigan should be able to take care of business here. But I don't know if you concur.
Yeah, I'm going to take Michigan in this one. The point about the, I guess, after effects of the, but I mean they've had multiple of these tough losses all year. But yeah, I'll go with I think Michigan in this game. I think Rutgers is going to have enough to score.
Definitely. We touched on Duke and Virginia, but we can go on our picks. I think the streak continues, and this feels like a season like where Virginia could tag Duke, just because this is not a super elite team, but we've seen non-super elite Duke teams pull out the regular season wins over Virginia. At Faulkner, maybe circle the wagons, potentially get into the ACC tournament, keep our season alive. I'm telling you, if Lars is able to pull that off and win the non-existing AQ for the ACC tournament and drags this team into the NCAA tournament with an at-large bid, is up there. It's up there with one of the best coaching jobs of his career, being able to salvage this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel Duke's is going to be able to just do it again.
It's just so hard to pick Virginia over Duke. I do, and we've seen Virginia.
I got to see it happen.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I got to see it happen. Again, in the regular season, it hasn't happened since 2004. I mean, one was the ACC tournament, one was the NCAA tournament. I saw the Virginia that played against Maryland, and I saw the way they were able to put together a game plan, and it didn't really work. It worked, but not enough for them to, pull out a W. But I saw what they're going for there. I saw the Cuse game. Again, I just kind of wonder if the Notre Dame game, they were in it for a bit, and then just all kind of, collapsed on Notre Dame got rolling in transition and got a couple goals in a row, and that was just it. The Carolina game, they just weren't really in that game at all. It just feels like they have such a high wide. They need to play so well to win these games. And I just don't know if I don't know. I don't know if they have. This will be the one. Yeah, it's at Klockner. Duke isn't a great face-off team, so the possession should be kind of leveled there. Duke has been a bad clearing team this year, and I mentioned Duke was clearing to 81% going into the Cuse game. Virginia gets that ride going. There's reason to think it could happen. Is Duke's offense going to have? Virginia's defense has gotten a lot better throughout the season. That's been their defense has played well. They can probably keep Duke to a number. Can their offense get over the line? Duke's defense is playing really, really well. That's kind of that's where they really need, they need the ride to be absolutely dynamic. They need to steal a couple goals there. I don't know. Are they going to go down? I'm talking myself into it now. It's so hard to see them going down with nothing. They don't have anything this season. They lost to Ohio State. They lost to Hopkins. They lost to Maryland. Their best win this season is, I don't even know. Towson? Colgate? It just feels like I remember Carolina back in those years where they missed the tournament. And Bresci always usually had one up his sleeve, They get Notre Dame at the end of the year. Or last year even, they got Duke. It just feels so hard to imagine even a down Lars team not being able to pull off anything, Not being able to pull off just one win that they can kind of hang their hat on towards the end of the year. Fuck it, I'm picking Virginia.
Do it for the meme.
LT, I gotta feel it. I'm putting my faith in you. Screw it. Everybody else is gonna pick Duke, so you know what? I might as well.
This would be the year if they pull it off. Probably one of their worst seasons.
Listen,
a bit. Not totally.
If I'm gonna die,
die on your feet. Die on your feet.
Die on that hill with LT. All right, I'm picking Virginia.
Better to live, better die on your feet than live on your knees. So. I'm going to stick with that, Duke. But
couldn't swing you.
I was close.
Oh man, if Virginia wins, it's gonna be chaos. Virginia wins. Duke just sitting at home.
Field.
Duke's
I like
sitting
to
at
speak.
home. Oh man. Lars turned into the fans, pumping him up.
He just does the. Oh yeah. Oh my God, I could just imagine that.
Oh man, Duke's sitting at home for an entire week trying to see if they get in. That'd be wild.
The Jose finger just running down. But
runs over to the hill.
just like fist in the air. Just like,
oh man, I hope he wears the suit and tie.
oh, bring it back, Lars.
All right, now I'm taking Cuse over Carolina.
I am as well. What's flirting with Carolina here, but Ryan picking the Tar Heels.
He's already done. He's
just done with this.
2 weeks ago, he was like, "Man, this rest of the season could really get rolling." Now, nope. Oh man. All right. How about that save? 2 hours and 5 minutes.
This is tight.
That's tidy.
Bracketology. I love it.
All right, friends. We are going to be live sometime Saturday night. Probably, I guess, after Syracuse and UNC, so maybe in the evening, something like that. So subscribe to the Crosse Commission on YouTube. We're also going to upload this episode, so subscribe to the Crosse Commission on YouTube. Smash that like button on the videos. But notifications, we're going live. We're going to go live this Saturday. We're also probably going to go live Friday during the conference. So when the ACC Ivy League, that night they play the semifinals, probably go live that night as well. Be there for that. And most importantly, Selection Sunday. Live show. Live on YouTube.
Let's go.
I think we'll go live. It's 8:30, I think, this year. I think they moved it up. 30 minutes. I think it's 8:30. So we'll probably go live 30 minutes beforehand. 9:30. I thought I saw 8:30 somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Whatever it is, we'll go live 30 minutes before the selection show goes on the air to break it all down. Maybe we'll have Mark kind of go through any last thoughts, questions, and then we'll also be live after some games during the tournament as well. So, what you got, Safe?
9:30 p.m.
Oh God!
On May 4th. What happened to this country? What have we done? Like, what?
They literally finished the bracket at like 3 o'clock.
The NCAA. I hope this is an instance of ChatGPT being wrong, but yeah, NCAA selection for men's and women's lacrosse show will be Sunday, May 4th, 2025 at 9:30 p.m. Eastern for men's and 9 p.m. Eastern for women's. Unbelievable.
Let me go to the NCAA page.
The selection criteria page conveniently does not have the starting time, but it just keeps saying the date. But I had to Google it, and I'm like, "Are you serious?"
That's absolutely just. All right, ESPN press room has 9:30. Jesus Christ, dude. Oh.
Yeah, it was on their release of last week's NCAA men's lacrosse committee top 10. That's 9:30 p.m. for the men's selection.
What time does the last conference championship game finish on Sunday? It's at
I think it was like 3 or 2. It's something started at 12.
It's at 3 because either one of them starts at 1, but I think 2 of them start at 12 and one of them starts at 1. The bracket is done at like 4 o'clock.
Yeah, the numbers are in. Zach's already got it. Just call Zach. We don't need to wait 5.5 hours.
RPI is done. You literally have almost made all the selections, and you're waiting until 9:30.
Unbelievable.
Baseball doesn't like. What are you showing that day? Like, I know that it literally on Sundays in the SEC and like baseball, they literally have like a hour limit that you can only they can only play a certain hour because they're like, all right, everybody got to get back to campus. Like, what is on at 7:00 on a Sunday night on ESPNU? Like, dude. Oh my God. That's a really sour note to end on. Anyhow, we'll be live, so join us there. Subscribe to the Cross Commission on YouTube. We'll see you Saturday for the Power Hour. All right.
Oh man, yeah, what a bummer.
Becky Lynn for president. Stay hydrated. It's getting warm out there. Everything, all at once.
Everywhere, all at once, except at ESPNU, where it doesn't start until 9:30. 9 o'clock. So.
See you out there.